Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Black Eagles YouTube channel. And today we are here to talk to you about the rest of the Super League. I think we talked about this a while ago already that we would be doing this new segment, but we were finding that our videos were already going quite long. So we decided to just make a separate video and we'll see how it does. If this doesn't do great, we might just move it on to Patreon for those of you who do enjoy this. If it's like something that gets like 20 views or something, then we might just, we'll see. Anyway, my guest tonight, or today, is Yasin Parlaksu. We already did a video together on Patreon recently, and you may recognize his face as well from our many YouTube shorts. Yasin, welcome to The Rest.
I'm pleasure to be here.
And if you hear my dog growling in the background, my apologies. She is staring outside the window right now and growling at all the passers-byers. So let's talk about the rest of the Super League, Yasin. We talk a lot about Beşiktaş, of course, in our main show. But this is really going to be centered more around the rest of the Super League. So on the left there, we already have the standings of the Super League. Right now, at the top are Fenerbahce with 10 points, I believe. Yeah, 10 points.
Yeah.
And then we are in third place at the moment. Of course, you do have to keep in mind that we have played 3 games. Fenerbahce have obviously played 4. And this weekend we have the derby. Well, it's not really a derby. It always irks me. Does it irk you when they call Trabzonspor Beşiktaş a derby, Yasin?
It's just not. It's neither locationally close, nor do we have any like rivalry with them. Like their only rivalry is really with Fenerbahce.
Yeah.
And if I want to annoy them, I'll say Rize as well.
Rize, Samsun, those are actually derbies.
Yes.
Yeah, it irks me when in Turkey they just use it wrong, but whatever. So the game is coming up this weekend, of course. And on the right hand of myself, or over there, you can see the results from this past match day number 4. So shall we talk about this in order of how they finished last season, or at least when it comes to the top, of course, so Galatasaray, Fenerbahce.
Sure.
I know you did a lot of homework, Yasin. You looked in depth at their transfers. Can you maybe pick out a couple of transfers that stand out for the current reigning champions Galatasaray, both in and out?
So for in, they did break their transfer record this season on Gabriel Sara from Norwich City in the Championship. It was kind of an unexpected transfer to me, especially like the fee and stuff. And the player just moved there last summer. I talked to like a Norwich fan about this, and she was quite sad to see him go. He was quite an effective player for them as like a number 10. He's versatile, he can play in other places, but he's mostly an attacker.
Yeah. That's the sense I got from watching him, because they've been utilizing him more as an 8 so far, and I really get the sense that this is a guy that, if I were them, I would use him as a successor to Mertes rather than putting him at the 8. Although I do think that against young boys he was decent, especially in the away game. And he was good in the league game as well. I mean, a lot of people were already like, after the first game, writing him off already, like, because he didn't have an instant impact. Like he had such impressive numbers at Norwich with double numbers essentially in the Championship, which is of course the second tier of English football. That people, I think, kind of expected him to come in with a bang, kind of like Rafa did with us, But he didn't. He didn't give an assist. He didn't give a goal. He didn't score a goal. And then people are instantly on him. It reminded me a little bit of how our rival fans were really tearing into Musrati after just the first couple of games. Like, oh, they paid 12 million for this guy and blah, 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 blah. But from what I've seen of him, he's
ridiculous to judge a defensive midfielder after 3 games. Like, a defensive midfielder's true worth can only be seen after like a season of him doing his thing.
Yeah, but even an attacking midfielder, but in this case, he obviously is being played as an 8. I think you need to give a player time to settle. you also need to take into account how the team is doing at the time. I think Galatasaray are a little bit in turmoil or a little bit chaotic at the moment. We'll talk about this in a bit, I guess, but eliminated by Young Boys in the Champions League. So not all is well there behind the scenes. There's a lot of pressure. So he's a player I'm not like in our little friend WhatsApp group, we already had one of them, Sali, I'm gonna give him a little shout out, and he was like already writing this guy off after one game, and I was just thinking to myself, dudes, don't do that. You might end up having to swallow your words, or you'll jinx him in a good way for them, but in a bad way for us, right? Like obviously, for us it wouldn't be bad if he turned out to be a flop, but yeah, I don't know. You have watched Galatasaray, right? What did you think of him so far?
I have to be honest. I have not seen the last game of theirs. I had something else to do, but I did watch the first. I actually did see the Adana game. That was the last game. I didn't really notice him, but the Adana game was also a bit misleading because Adana were
giving it
very poor.
Well, I thought they weren't that poor, honestly, up until they concede that ridiculous first goal and then the ridiculous second goal, and after that their heads just went hanging and things escalated. But
I actually, on the contrary, I thought in the second half I did see something more like attacking wise. I mean, defensively it was poor, but I did see some actions like in the 70th minute or something. Like they did get 2 penalties during the game.
Put 2 penalties.
One missed, one shot.
Yeah. They actually should have. They had a penalty shot in the first couple of minutes at 0-0, and I think that's so typical that they kind of get cheap penalties. Like I think both of those penalties they got were kind of like cheap, and I just remember thinking, I don't think they'd get those at 0-0, and I think the only reason they really got them was because it was 5-0, honestly. But yeah.
But the other 2 games, like against Konya and against Hatay, especially the Hatay game, they were really, really poor. I mean, Hatay is a team I'm expecting to get relegated this season. Yeah. I think on paper they're the weakest team in the league. I'm not really impressed by them. I mean, they aren't as bad as I thought. I mean, they still only have 1 point after 4 games, but still, like against Galatasaray. I mean, Galatasaray, they played really poorly against them, and they were even behind for a good chunk of the game.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it's typical Hatay again, right? They were winning away at Galatasaray, then they get a iffy penalty against, and then they concede a goal that a lot of the experts are saying, ex-referees are saying should have been disallowed for offside. And then they lose that first game in the 90th minute. Then on match day 2, they were winning and they lose their 3 points in extra time. And I think they again pulled another one of those 90-plus minute defeats the other week. So, and then of course now this match day they lost 3-0 at home without a chance. But Hatay is just one of those teams that I also have pegged as a relegation candidate this season. And of course they lost their best player, right, with Delabashiru, who went to Lazio. I definitely think he was their best player. What else did Galatasaray bring in that stood out to you?
I mean, obviously we can talk about the big elephant in the room now. After European deadline day shots, they brought in Victor Osimhen from Napoli. Like, basically, this league was his only chance at playing football because Napoli already had excluded him from the squad. He wasn't going to play there. So basically, it was our league or nothing.
Well,
and so Galatasaray,
the Portuguese league is still open. I think the Greek league is still open. Russia, Belgium is open until the 6th. There's leagues that are still open, but I think in terms,
but like the top leagues, the top 5.
Yeah, top 5 leagues have all shut, and I think the main issue is I think the Saudi league also shut. Otherwise,
on the 2nd.
Yeah, so like I don't think there were any leagues open other than perhaps the Portuguese league with clubs that can realistically afford to cover the majority of his wages or even all his wages. That I think that was the biggest issue. But
I don't see like the Portuguese clubs doing something financially reckless like that.
I mean, Benfica, they spend almost 10 million a year on Di Maria, so
maybe,
but yeah, I think you're right.
But it happens to be a Galatasaray. At first, when I saw people on TikTok talking about it, like German Galatasaray fans, I thought, what are they yapping on about? Like I thought they completely lost their minds, but ultimately it did happen. And the screaming and the shouting was immense, and now the greatest thing about this is that they now kiss the board's ass.
Yeah.
Like they're now kissing like the current board's ass that they were screaming and shouting about the entire summer, wanting gone.
You know what? I follow very few Galatasaray fans because I can't. It's hard. It's hard to.
Yeah.
It's hard. I have very few Galatasaray friends. I think I have like 2, 3 guys that I would call a friend. Like that and like. I generally feel that Galatasaray fans are the worst. Like, I can stand Fener fans. I have family who are Fener fans, and they're usually, they're also pretty bad. But like, you can somewhat reason with a Fener guy. But Galatasaray fans have such a weird worldview sometimes. I feel when it comes to football. There's a couple of them that I like, but they're I can count them all. I can count them on one hand. And what baffled me, especially like online, they had the UEFA deadline yesterday as well, just like we did, and they, contrary to us, I think, like, look, I think we have a good first 11. I think we should have gotten somebody who can back up Masuaku and potentially even Svensson, so someone who can maybe play on both left and right back. I think that's definitely a hole in our team, in our squad, I should say. But I think in terms of our first 11 is great. It's ready. But look at their first 11 now, because one of the things you didn't mention is that Kerem Aktürkoğlu, he went actually to Benfica for 12 million euros, so he left. Like, now they brought in a second star striker. Well, let's call it a second star striker. I'm not gonna call Batshuayi a star striker in 2024. He's a great super sub. He's not a star striker at this point. So they got a second star striker now, but they have one natural winger in Barış Alper. They have Hakim Ziyech, who I wouldn't call him a natural winger because he's more number 10 in my opinion, even though throughout his career he has been utilized a lot on the right. But okay, you know what? And then Dries Mertens, he was a natural winger earlier in his career, but obviously he's 38 years old now, so he's a number 10 at the moment. Like, he doesn't have the legs for that anymore. They don't have wingers, man. Like, they got rid of their, in my opinion, best winger, and I'm sure Galatasaray fans will disagree and say, no, Barış Alper is much better than Kerem. But, Kerem's been just one of those guys that have been... I'm not a big Kerem fan, don't get me wrong. But, like, I think he is one of their most valuable and underrated players because he creates so much chaos. Like, even in the Super Cup against us, he was the only guy that I felt in the first half, especially because he got yoinked at halftime. He was the only guy I was like, oh shit, maybe he'll do something. Like, there are few moments in the first half when they created some danger, some chaos came from him, in my opinion. And he does that in a lot of games. Look at the Adana Demirspor game now. Like, they break that game open on a long ball headed to Kerem, which the young goalkeeper, Dennis, 15 years old, he makes a mistake on that. He doesn't judge the trajectory of the ball properly. But it's Kerem who puts him under pressure. Kerem who's chasing down that ball. And that's something you see often. Kerem often forces their opponents to make mistakes. He might not be technically the best player in the world and all that kind of stuff. He might miss a lot of chances, but he gets into those goal-scoring positions. Like last year in the Champions League, Galatasaray fans very harsh on him, I think, for missing all those chances. But they don't have a single other player on their team that gets into those positions, that makes those instinctive runs. They don't have it. And now they don't have anything like that anymore because they didn't bring anyone in. And despite that, I'm only seeing them drooling over Osimhen on the line. Like, I'm not seeing any of them raging or... I mean, look, they don't have to rage for me, but I'm not seeing any of them being a little bit sober and saying, yeah, but we don't have a winger, we don't have a proper number 8 yet for putting next to Torreira. We still have our Swiss cheese back line. Like,
that's what I also said to someone who I'm in contact with who doesn't follow Turkish football a lot. And he was like, oh, they signed Osimhen, it's over, they're gonna win the league. And I kind of told him their squad is trash. If you look at it. Maybe not trash, but not very good.
I think
Muslera is kind of starting to falter a bit.
Well, he's had that in the past where you think, oh, is it over? Is it finally over from our perspective? But then he regains his composure and he goes on and he has a great season and wins them the freaking championship. So I wouldn't write Muslera off.
Muslera is the Jason Voorhees of Turkish football. He always comes back.
Exactly. You can't kill him. And I don't think their players are trash at all. I think they have really good players. The problem is they have holes. They have gaps in their team.
I did say the squad, not the players.
Yeah. I mean, I still think. They're still coming off of a 102-point season where they arguably had. I mean, I think Fener had the better squad, honestly, but they still have a top squad for this league, and something we'll get into a little bit. Sure, I think this squad they have right now, they're I don't expect much from them in Europe, even though they have a on paper favorable draw, but. In the league, I mean, we saw it against Adana Demirspor, we saw it against Konyaspor, and yeah, sure, Kerem was important in especially that Adana game, but I don't know if there are teams or enough teams rather in the league right now that are able to hurt them even with their deficiencies. Obviously they'll drop points at some point, right? Even last season they dropped some points. I think they'll drop more points this season, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But I agree with you that the squad is incomplete for sure.
To be fair, even with a comparatively bad squad, you can still compete in this league just because the rest of the league is comparatively poor. I mean, there's some good teams still in this league, but when half of the league isn't doing any transfers in the summer, seemingly.
Or barely.
It's kind of hard to keep up with,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's not that Galatasaray, they're still favorites for the league, or one of the favorites, obviously. But that's more an indictment of how poor the bottom half of this league is.
Last season, I really think we, don't get me wrong, I thought Fenerbahce were really good last season. I didn't think Galatasaray were really good. And I think that tells you a bit about the league last season. It was just obviously we were absolutely dog shit. Trabzon were trash. Başakşehir was for the most part trash. They started off really poorly. They were in the relegation zone for 8-9 weeks. Then Çağdaş Atan took over and he put them back on track and ultimately got them a European ticket. So he did great, but they still weren't a match for neither of them, And then, the teams that over the last couple of seasons, like Adana Demirspor, who had been doing really well and competing and being a sub-top team that you really had to be careful for, especially in the away games, they were pretty trash because they started leaking all their players. Their players started tearing up their contracts, leaving on freeze. Svensson, for example, who went to us. They weren't that bad in the first half of the season when they smashed us. But, depending on when you played them, if Gala and Fener, I don't remember exactly when they played them, but I think at least one of them played them at home in the first half of the season. given the context of how Adana Demirspor kind of unraveled last season, playing them at home in the first half of the season is definitely favorable, because then in the second half of the season, at that point, like Belhanda was gone, Svensson was gone. I think only Balotelli was still there, and all the other big name players were gone at that point. So yeah, I just think Galatasaray did not impress me much last season. Like even in the games against us, like they did not impress me, and we were dog shit. Fener are the only team that impressed me last season, and ironically, they finished second and Galatasaray won the title. But I think that's just down to the fact that Galatasaray went on that 17-game winning streak, in which they got plenty of help from the referees. And don't get me wrong, Fener got their share of help as well. They got a lot of dodgy late penalties, but I other than the Kasımpaşa game, where I really think the referees just bailed them out with that almost fantasy handball in like the 97th minute. Other than that one, I can't really think of many. And then you have like, again, with Galatasaray, there were a bunch of games, like in the Kasımpaşa one in particular jumps out to me, like where they just got so much help. And again, very similar to this Hatay game, 80th minute, they were down a goal and they get a penalty. They don't score that one, by the way, but but Kasımpaşa do get a red card. And then they score like a minute later, and then score again a few minutes later, and yeah, I don't know, like
to put a bow on Galatasaray for this episode, I think we can quickly talk about the fact that they have to now change their position and their tactics just because of what their squad now is with the lack of wingers. A lot of people have already theorized that they're gonna play a 3-4-1-2 or 3-4-3.
Yeah.
A back three.
That's what you would think, right? Like 3-5-2, 3-4-3, something like that. But
yeah, depending on if they want to start all three of the strikers, or if maybe they want Sada as a 10 behind probably Icardi and Osimhen with Batshuayi on the bench.
Yeah.
That will be interesting to see. Maybe, I mean, is there? I don't know if there's a recent example of a back three working in Turkey. If somebody has been able to play a back
Beşiktaş
three
in 2002, 2003.
Okay, that's a bit
not very recent for you, especially. For me, it's still relatively fresh in my mind. But
I mean, I was alive.
You were alive.
That's about it.
No, successfully, definitely not. If you remember Ismail, he was heavily criticized for his three-man backline ideas. And you know what? I mean, look, they can theorize all they want. Okan Buruk can't even make a 4-3-3 work against tough opponents. How's he going to make 3 at the back work? And, I mean, I don't know. Davinson Sanchez is still out for a while, I think. He's very important for them. Once he's back, and then you have in theory Sanchez, Nelson, Abdulkarim, I think that's a decent 3-man back line. But in order to play 3-5-2 or 3-4-3, you still need really good wingbacks. And
they signed that guy from Copenhagen.
Yeah,
for decent money.
Yeah, they paid almost 10 million for him, but he's looked like I mean, again, like I'm not one of those people who wants to write them off, like a transfer write them off after just a couple of games, but like Okan is writing him off, like Okan doesn't seem to like him much. Like that says that's a little bit of an indictment to him. I mean, not necessarily to the player, more to Okan perhaps, but yeah. And then they have this new guy from Monaco. I forget his name. I want to say Jackson, but that's not right.
Speaking on him, apologies, I forgot to mention something. Yeah. Like a huge news over the summer, especially because for me, because a German club was involved, so I heard a lot about it. The Derek Köhn situation where they didn't pay him. That was another embarrassing thing for the league. And that's, for me, that's why...
embarrassing for the league? Why is it embarrassing for the league? It's Galatasaray, not the Super League.
Yeah, but the issue is, and that's something that I have personally, if one Turkish club does something stupid, it reflects, to me, for like outsiders, it reflects on the rest of the league for some reason. Like they can't differentiate between Gala
That's their problem. That's those people's problem. If they cannot differentiate between one club and other clubs, then they're just being dumb. So you shouldn't pay attention to that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that has been. I mean, I think that illustrates the issues Galatasaray are having, right? Like they can't pay a player they bought last January. They can't pay his transfer fee. Then the news came out that they still owed Icardi 5 million, which has been confirmed by one of them board members. And now they're signing Osimhen for, officially 6 million. They'll be paying him. But if Icardi isn't getting paid, then a lot of their players aren't getting paid. And that also could bring with it some disgruntledness from their players, because now they're bringing in yet another guy who's on 4 times the wages that most of them are on, and that definitely isn't going to work well for their locker room, I think.
Sure.
So I mean, they got that guy from Monaco, which we were saying. So I don't know if they have those the wing backs for playing 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. I definitely think Barış Alper could be one of them, because I think Barış Alper is actually a better wing back than he is an all-out winger, because he's a bad finisher. He's a really bad finisher. His crossing game, his cutback passes are good, generally, but he doesn't have the highest footballing IQ. I think his main strengths are his stamina, his strength, and
his pressing.
Yeah, exactly. So as a wing back, I think for Barış Alper, a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2 could actually really unlock his hidden potential. So for him, it might be good. But then on that left side, I mean, the guy from Monaco is a question mark still. Gillert, we'll have to wait and see how he develops further. But so far, things aren't looking great for him. Definitely Kaan Ayhan isn't going to play a wing back. Like, he's already, when he is a right back for them, he's a very stationary right back. He's a very defensive right back, so that definitely does not suit him. So then maybe he has to move to the midfield or something. It's easy set. I think it's easily set. Okay, they're just gonna switch to 3-5-2 or they're gonna switch to 3-4-3. Excuse me. It's easily said, like I said, but I don't see Okan pulling it off successfully. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think he is. Yeah.
Either that or maybe a diamond. That's because they have to play something wingerless unless they want to put one of their strikers on the wing.
Yeah.
So they have to play something without wingers. So maybe a diamond instead. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I don't know.
So let's talk about the the nearly man of last season.
Yeah, let's talk about the nearly man. I don't know what's up with my throat suddenly. Yeah, Fenerbahce, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about Fenerbahce. They, to me, look a lot more complete. Let's talk about their transfers. What are their big incoming transfers, Yasin?
The striker from Sevilla. I have trouble saying his name correctly. El Niziri, thank you. El Niziri. El Niziri, I mean, he's a league record signing now at almost 20 million.
19.5, I think, right?
Yeah. They also got Chadlar on a permanent, which is decent signing. I mean, transfer. that's a good transfer. Especially, you need Turkish players always, so it's a good signing.
He's not the player he was a few years ago, but I mean, he's still for the Turkish Super League standards. And I think if you've seen him last season and so far this season, he's a great player for the Turkish Super League. So even though they paid a lot of money for him, I think 10 million, which is a lot, but I still think it's a good transfer for them. And Iziri, yeah, I think that's a cat in a bag, but whatever.
I think they wanted to have a striker who did well in a top 5 league, and he was the one that was willing to come, and they were able to pay sort of deal.
Did he do well in the top 5 league though? He had one.
He did score 15 goals for Sevilla.
Last season, And look at the season before that, and the season before that, and the season before that, and the season before that. Like, he has 1 or 2 seasons where he's got more than 10 goals in the league. And he's 27, and he's not like he's 23 years old or anything like that. He's 27 years old. Plus he has an elephant touch. Like, he'll score plenty of headers. I'm sure that if they can feed him the crosses, he'll score plenty of headers.
Speaking of crosses, they also signed Oğuz Aydın from Alanya for 6 million as a youngish Turkish player. He's 23. He had a good season at Alanya last year, but maybe 6 million is a bit much.
Given the fact that he has barely featured, yes, definitely. But that was one of those transfers they made kind of despite Galatasaray, right? They signed Oğuz Aydın to prevent Galatasaray from getting him. Galatasaray...
Always the best transfer business if you only do it to spite your rivals.
You also need to keep in mind, at the time when they signed him, the foreigner change wasn't official yet. So Turkish players were a little bit more valuable at that point. But in essentially what was going on, Galatasaray wanted him, didn't want to pay the 6 or 7 million that Alanya were offering. So they were just offering like 4 million. And Fenerbahce came in and said, we'll pay the 6, I'll take him. And it was really just to prevent, because, obviously Alanya were ultimately they were going to reach an agreement at some point. Like, if you'd leave that for a while, nobody else comes in with more money, towards now, for example, Galatasaray would have been able to pick him up for like 4. And that's why Fener said, no, we'll pay the 6. That prevent this guy from going there.
Yeah. The other wing is filled. The left. Alan Saint-Maximin is the other winger they signed on loan from Al Ali for 8 million. That's a loan fee, but I don't think they have to have any wage contributions, from what I heard. So basically, that's including his wages. Still an exorbitant loan fee.
It's insane. What do you think of Saint-Maximin?
Saint-Maximin is a player, like, when he was in the Premier League, I never quite understood the hype. He was always, for me, flash and no end product. Like, he did some flashy things, but he never consistently scored or assisted goals. Yeah. He never was that effective in games. He was playing for a mediocre Newcastle team at the time. That was before they had the Saudi takeover. But still, I never understood the hype with him. I don't watch the Saudi League, so I can't judge him on that. Although, how well is it to judge players of the Saudi League if Nkudu is a world-class player in that league? If Bernard Mensah is a world-class player in the league? How much is the Saudi League worth?
And then he did nowhere near as good as those two did. Like, statistically, I think he had he had very few goal contributions in the Saudi Pro League, and I am of the exact same opinion of you. A little different, maybe, because I do think he's a freak athlete. He is built like a monster. He's very fast, very skilled on the ball, very flashy. But, like, in only the first couple of games so far, like, against Lille and against Lugano, like, the amount of chances he created but missed. And I know I just said about Kerem as well, where Kerem creates his own chances, essentially. And Saint-Maximin was kind of similar, I guess. But the difference is, Kerem, he misses chances, but he'll still get you like 10, 15 goals. This guy isn't going to get you 10, 15 goals, I don't think. Unless, like, they put him on a platter, maybe. But yeah, he definitely has qualities. There's certainly something there. I actually think he would fit in really well in our squad. But I kind of feel like they displaced their best player, at least statistically, from last season, Dusan Tadic. They displaced him out of his favorite position, which is left winger, in favor for Saint-Maximin now, who is a lot less productive. Yeah, he creates some chaos and all that. He's extremely fast. He's strong. He definitely weighs on an opponent. But you're yeah, Tadic hasn't been as effective ever since they moved him to behind the striker or on the right side. And I feel like Tadic was their not always best on the field, but especially in terms of goal contributions, was their best player last season. And he created a lot of goal scoring opportunities for them as well, even the ones that didn't end in goals. So displacing him kind of doesn't make sense to me. That's like saying signing Rafa and putting him on the 8 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's, I don't know. I mean, speaking of the 8, that's a midfield position. We could talk about the 2 midfielders they signed.
Yeah.
Rade Krunic from AC Milan, who I speak a lot with like one Fener fan in Turkey. We have a pretty good rapport, so I hear a lot what the Fener fans think, and he's already somebody who's a bit who started out rather poorly.
Yeah, but they signed him in January on an obligation, right? Like a loan with obligation to buy, so they were forced to buy him, but they actually loaned him to Red Star Belgrade.
Did they already loan him?
They sent him away like 2 days ago because he was just so he was so underwhelming. I'll put it that way.
And they signed Amrabat from Fiorentina on a season-long loan.
Yeah, also with an obligation, I think, for 13 million euros. So that's going to be an expensive signing for them. He was great at the World Cup, and I think he's still kind of coasting off of that. He played briefly for Club Brugge in Belgium. Did not impress. Obviously, he's done well enough for Fiorentina. Was on loan at Manchester United last season. I honestly didn't watch him much. I don't know. I know you watched quite a bit of Premier League. What was your impression of him, or did you not really notice him at all?
I didn't really notice him at all. I don't go out of my way to watch United games. So, although to be fair, defensive midfielders are. That's a position you can't really judge as an outsider all too much unless it's like a Rodri.
You need to pay attention.
Or somebody who's like spectacular as a defensive midfielder.
If you want to,
it's a difficult position, you know, to properly judge a player on, unless it's
unless
for your
you're
team.
watching the team weekly and you're like really paying attention properly. Like, you know, we pay attention to our team, we pay attention to how Musrati performs, right? But like, if you watch the sporadic game for Fiorentina or Manchester United and you're not like a talent scout or something, you're just a normal average guy, like, you're not gonna notice the defensive midfielder most of the time. Like, a lot of their work, like, let's take Atiba for example, like a lot of the things he did didn't go, went pretty much unnoticed. Like, they were the silent workers.
Yeah, I mean, Atiba only really got his flowers from the rest of the league, really, when he shifted to an 8. And he was like, scoring some goals, some assists later on in his career. That was when the rest of the league started to really notice him.
Yeah, I did.
And something I've noticed, they did a John Kellish-esque signing by signing someone from Karagümrük for multiple millions of euros.
Mercan.
They signed a left back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's I know Karagümrük did some really good business despite being relegated.
Yeah, that's a good segue into their biggest outgoing transfer, which is Ferdi Kadioglu, and I think they signed Levent even before they brought in Mourinho. I think they signed him straight.
Are we just going to segue away from Cenk? Are we just gonna ignore him?
Well, we can talk about Cenk in a second, but Levent they brought in almost straight after the season. I think they already had a deal in place for him, like, as the season was still going. Like, it was very clear that they were gonna sign Levent Mercan. I don't think he has played under Mourinho. I might be mistaken, maybe in some friendlies, but definitely not in the official games. And I think they were kind of anticipating Ferdi going, but then it kind of, for the longest time, it kind of looked like Ferdi was gonna stay. And now, of course, Ferdi left and went to Brighton for 30 million, which can add up to 35 million. Great deal for Fener, I think, but they were trying to hold out for even more. And great deal for Ferdi as well, I think. I hope he'll do well there. His career there hasn't gone off to a great start because he already got injured. So hopefully he won't be constantly injured or something. But yeah, I don't think Levent Mercan is somebody that Mourinho really views as a worthy replacement, and they didn't get anyone Obviously, the window is still open until the 13th, but they can't register those players for the UEFA list. So, for me, in my head, like the transfer window's done for Beşiktaş, Fenerbahçe, and Galatasaray, but maybe it's not. Like maybe one of these clubs still decides on bringing in somebody. It's only 8 games in Europe that they'll miss. They can always register them then after the league stages are over. So, but right now they're kind of forced to playing Oosterwolde in that left back role. And while he is definitely fast and he's a good central defender, I don't think he has the ability to really contribute as a good offensive back. Like, I just don't see that in him. And Levet Mercan so far hasn't really gotten any playing time. But yeah, Ferdi, for me, that's a massive loss. I think that's a big loss for them. I don't know what you think, but it's going to be almost impossible to replace.
He was especially an offensive weapon for them. I mean, as a left back, he was very good at creating chances and as an offensive fallback, he was far better than as a defensive one. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Yeah, I mean, he was one of their best players last season, and I mean, they'll have to cope. I mean, it's less bad if it's a fallback. I think it's one of the positions where you can more sort of shoehorn someone in and make up for that than if, for example, if it's a midfielder or if it's the striker. I think it's less bad, but Ferdi absolutely is a big loss for them.
Yeah, definitely. And they did not replace him. Maybe they'll replace him in January. I think a lot of the Fenerbahce fans were expecting them to splash that 35 million, but other than Amrabat, I don't think they did anything with that money. I guess they had already...
They didn't really have time. I mean, I guess they could have beforehand had some replacement.
They should have had players lined up, right? Like Archie Brown from Ghent was talked about, but that didn't materialize. I don't know. I haven't really noticed the Fenerbahce fans online, how they are reacting to the fact that they haven't signed anyone for the left back position. I don't know if you have your finger on the pulse there. I got the impression you see more Galatasaray fans than Fener fans.
Yeah, I mean, that's just because, in Germany, for the record, 60-70% of fans online are all Gala fans, so it's kind of unavoidable to see them, unfortunately. Yeah, but anyway.
I mean,
we can talk about the Europe, like Fenerbahce's European exploits thus far.
Yeah.
Like they beat Lugano.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
in both
legs.
They
did, but kind of by the skin of their teeth. I don't know if you watched those games.
Yeah, I watched the first one, the 3-4.
And what did you think?
Yeah, that was a back and forth.
I thought Lugano were the better team, honestly. I think they were playing the better football, and it was just Tadic and Dzeko who turned on the class. But in terms of team play, I thought Lugano were the better team in both games. Even in the second game, Lugano dominated the first half. That's saying something, I think, if you can dominate in Kadıköy.
Yeah.
So that's also why
I mean, we know that they're a good team.
Lugano. 100%. Like, I would not be surprised if they make a very serious run for the Swiss League this season. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up winning it. Obviously, it's early days, but And then against Lille, did you watch those games?
No, in all honesty, but I did keep up with them, and Fener were better in those games.
Well,
from the highlights I've seen.
In France, in the first half, Lille was definitely the better team, and I think it could have been 3-0 at halftime. But then in the second half, Fener definitely restored balance, and they were the better team, deserved to equalized on a free kick from Irfan Cankavici, and then somehow conceded the 2-1 and lost that first leg. And that's how ultimately that put them in a very precarious position for the second leg, which obviously they did win in normal time by the skin of their teeth with a kind of a lucky goal on a corner, own goal I think it was. And then of course they conceded a penalty in extra time and went out against Lille. I mean, on paper, I don't think it's a shame to go out against Lille. They're a good team. But then if I watched Lille against Slavia Prague, I definitely thought to myself. Also, over those two games, I definitely think, I think if Fener had the eye of the tiger, so to speak, they would have knocked out Lille. Because Lille weren't. It's not like Lille was amazing. They had a really good goalkeeper, Chevalier. We should get that guy, by the way. Not just based on this game, but he's really good. Not realistic, but, I don't know. I kind of feel that if Fener was... I expected more from Mourinho, from Mourinho's Fenerbahce, honestly. I know it's early, but I think it was the first time ever Mourinho got knocked out in qualifiers for a European tournament.
Yeah, but to be fair, Mourinho typically plays in leagues where you don't really have qualification. I mean, Roma had to, because the Conference League doesn't have any teams that just get in automatically. There's no league phase entrance for the Conference League. But outside of that, he usually managed in leagues where there aren't any qualifiers.
I'm sure he's played qualifiers. Hasn't he, like...
Yeah, I mean, he has, but not many. That's more the point I'm getting at.
Still, though, you pay a manager the type of money you pay him. What is she doing? She just did a little stretch exercise before she left. You pay him the type of money you're paying him, and then I think you imagine if they got to the Champions League, because had they beat...
Yeah, that's more the worry from a Turkish perspective, that they got to the Champions League and then they got hopelessly outclassed every game.
I don't know if they would have. I mean, I think Galatasaray definitely would have. Tactically, they're just inept, against European opponents. Yeah. But Mourinho, you'd expect to put up a decent fight. I think they have a better squad anyway. And for example, I think had they played Young Boys, they would have gone through. I definitely think Fener would have beaten Young Boys over 2 legs. And honestly, I think they should have beaten Lille, and that was the first big disappointment for them. And then, of course, a few days later, they have that 2-2 draw against Göztepe after being 2-0 up at halftime. So Fener already kind of showing some signs of... not yet being all they're cracked up to be, perhaps. And the thing is, for me, they came out of last season, they didn't lose a single key player other than Ferdi. For me, they had such an easy summer. It was just for them, bring in a couple of key players, a couple of really good players, and they are favorites for the championship. And of course, they're still the favorites, but honestly, En-Nesyri, I don't think that's he's not even playing right now. Edin Dzeko is still their starting striker. Saint-Maximin, we've already talked about it. A lot of foreplay, but no climax. And then, who else did they get? Oh yeah, Amrabat, we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But I get the feeling they kind of dropped the ball in this transfer window. I'm not really impressed with what they brought in. I don't know what you think, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think you could have invested the money better than En-Nesyri.
Yeah.
I think if you spend 20 million on a player, it should be a better investment than... I think En-Nesyri... Yeah, En-Nesyri... I don't think...
When the European window closed, Yasin, I thought to myself, I wonder where Osimhen's gonna go. And I legit thought about writing this in one of our groups. It's what, Fener should get Osimhen. Just on a loan, a season or something, because that would make sense. But I thought, it's never gonna happen.
I mean, Mourinho called him Drogba levels, which for Mourinho is like me calling someone Quaresma level.
Yeah.
It's the highest praise he can bestow upon a player. Yeah. So it would have made sense in that sense.
I think it would have. I think Fener, if they had, of course it was up. Who would have thought that Osimhen would still be at Napoli, right? Come January 1st. September 1st, sorry. Like, who would have thought that? Everyone was thinking he was going to go to Arsenal or to Chelsea or maybe even to Saudi Arabia. Yeah, nobody thought he was still going to be there. Like, not even Napoli thought so, right? So, yeah, obviously Fener couldn't have known. But even though they got En-Nesyri, I still would have gotten him. Like, for me, for Gala, it makes much less sense. Like, they had so...
They have Icardi. They already have a 20-goal season.
They have Icardi. They have Batshuayi, which is definitely for a backup striker a super good option. And like the arguments, like one of the Galatasaray fans I know says, yeah, but Icardi's gonna be out for a while, you know. And I'm like, oh, they said 3 weeks. Yeah, but it's gonna be like 6 weeks. Okay, 6 weeks, but 2 of those weeks are already gone due to the international break. So then he's out for a month. So he'll miss what, like 4 league games? Are you kidding, Osimhen? Because Icardi's missing 4 league games. You can't count on your 4 million a year second striker Michy Batshuayi for 4 games. Come on. Like, Gala, in my opinion, Gala should have used that money. If they were smart, they should have used it on a proper winger or a proper 8 or a proper whatever. They have other... Especially now with Kerem gone, they should have replaced Kerem. They should have gotten a good winger. But they didn't. They just went for another striker. So, I don't know. Fener, in my opinion, despite the fact that they have Dzeko and they have En-Nesyri, I think the rest of their team, other than the left back, is so complete already that for them it would have made sense. It would have made sense for them to get Osimhen. Just as a... Like that, for me, Osimhen to Gala does not to me scream, oh, they're going to win the league now. But Osimhen to Fener, that would have been like, okay, I think they're going to win it.
The final piece in the puzzle.
Potentially, yeah.
Well, I guess the second final piece because the left back.
Yeah, but I mean, Oosterwolde, okay, he's not going to be Verdi. He's not going to be, no chance. But like, he's still going to be serviceable and that's fine. And as long as he's defensively stable, like they can just, play more over the right then. In the league that shouldn't that shouldn't make that much of a difference. Anything else you want to talk about?
Quickly about Fenerbahce's Europa League phase draw. They have some very favorable opponents. Union Saint-Gilloise.
They're in a terrible form right now. So and they changed manager again, 3rd time in 3 years. They let go their best player, went to Saudi. And right now in the beginning of the season in Belgium, they're looking really poor. So
some mid-tier opponents in Twente, Alkmaar, and Midtjylland. Then a home game against Man United. We all know Jose Mourinho loves to play against former clubs, against former teams and stuff. And mind games will be there in that game. I think that's a potential banana peel for Man United.
Banana peel.
Just because Mourinho's gonna do something.
Is that a German saying? That's a potential banana peel?
No.
It's perfectly fine.
Slipping on a banana peel.
Of course, but like the way you said it, like I was just wondering if in Germany they say that, like...
Not really, I think that's an English thing.
Yeah, slipping on a banana peel for sure, but the way you said it, I really like that. A potential banana peel.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I haven't...
Yeah, and then they actually do share some opponents with us. Obviously Twente, as I said, but also Athletic Club and Lyon. But they have both at home instead of one away, we do.
Yeah.
So I think we can move on. I don't want to talk about Cenk now.
Well, yeah, of course Cenk went to Fener, but he's gonna be their 3rd option striker. How much is...
And he's finished
how much
anyway.
Is he really gonna play, right?
And he's finished.
Well, that's what you say. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. Well, we've been...
I mean, despite the fact that Başakşehir are in Europe, I mean, it's Başakşehir. Yeah. I think we should still talk about Trabzon before that.
Yeah, we're already 54 minutes in, so I don't want to go too long. So let's speed up a little bit. But
quickly, I mean, Trabzon is not... Fener and Gala, they're like the big 2 we have to talk about, and the rest we can kind of talk about in like 5-10 minute things for some of them.
You said the name of the show. Yeah, I think the big thing with Trabzon is, of course, their managerial change now, right? Like they dismissed Abdullah Avci and they brought back Şenol Güneş. And also, I don't know if you know, like obviously you noticed it because you have this entire file you sent me on what came in when went out and stuff. But they signed Simon Banza from Braga on loan with a 25 million option to buy. But this guy scored 21 goals last season in the Portuguese league. Like, how on earth did they pull that one off? Like, I mean, people are talking about Osimhen. I mean, I think this is not bigger, but more mind-blowing to me. This is a guy that's valued on Transfermarkt at like 18 million. I mean, you know me. I'm not a big fan of those transfer market values, but 21 goals in the Portuguese league last season. That's a lot. Like Osimhen, he was in a very specific situation that made this possible. Under normal circumstances, he would never come to Turkey. But Banza going to Trabzon, like, what am I missing there? What is happening? What is the circumstance that enabled that move to happen? Because Trabzon can never pay that transfer fee. Why are Braga letting him go? He scored 21 goals for them last season. Like, this just doesn't make any sense at all for me. Like, for the longest time, they were looking to bring back Onuachu. Of course, they couldn't find a deal. Supposedly, Southampton wanted at least 7 or 8 million for him. And I get that like being Trabzon, you don't want to pay that for a 30-year-old. I understand that. But then you go and you bring in Simon Banza for one season. Look, realistically, that's just going to be it. They're just bringing him in for one season. There's no way they can pay that transfer fee. So I don't understand how Braga, like, I feel like Braga got them, like, just got scammed,
I don't get it either. I mean, this is a head scratcher, the fact that they sold, not sold, but loaned him out even.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, what I also don't get is why Trabzon, I mean, good thing they dismissed Abdullah Avci, but they should have done that last season, at the end of last season. I mean, they went into him in Europe without a striker. Yeah. A little anecdote from me. I tried to watch their last game against Eyüpspor. I watched 2.5 minutes of it, and I hated football. So I switched over to Başakşehir against Antalya. That was a really good game.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that on the record. Yeah. Başakşehir Antalya was a really entertaining game of football.
It went from 2-0 to 2-4, I think, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Antalya, they had a really good first half. Not to go too deep into the game, but they had a really good first half, and then they collapsed. Yeah. And Başakşehir, and their Piatek, who's a really good striker for them. Piontek, he scored like a hat trick, so that was a good game. And then you watch Eyüp in comparison, where there was one chance the entire game.
Yeah. Trabzon this season so far have been absolutely dreadful to watch. They don't score goals. Like, they
2-0.
No, but not just in the league, also in Europe. Like, they didn't score a single goal against Rapid Wien. They lost. Was it Rapid Wien? Yeah, I think it was Rapid Wien.
Yeah, Rapid Vienna.
2-0 in Vienna, 0-0 at home. Then against St. Gallen, 0-0 in Switzerland and 1-1 at home. So yay, they scored a goal. And then
they lost. And then
2 0-0s in the league. So they've scored 1 goal this season in 6 official games, 1 goal. And now, of course, they signed Mohamed Cham, who came from Clermont Foot, I think. And then they signed Banza now. And Trezeguet left to Saudi on loan. So I'm curious to see what's gonna happen there. Like, look, they still have until the 13th. They don't have Europe. They don't have to worry about the UEFA list, so they can still freely bring in any player, and it won't really matter because they only have the Turkish Super League anyway. So I would not be surprised if they still bring in some winger or something, or a couple of players that Şenol Güneş wants, because Şenol Güneş always wants some players. Like, he has his list probably. And we play them next. Are you worried that the new coach rebound, maybe breath of fresh air through the locker room?
I would be, especially because it's Şenol Güneş. And we saw that last time he was at Beşiktaş. He had an immediate impact on us. But I'm not worried because we have Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. I'm fully confident in our coaching staff and our players.
Yasin,
that we can.
Did he have an instant impact? Wasn't his first game? I don't remember if it was his first. It might have been his second, but it was either his first or his second game was against Galatasaray, and he lost. So.
Yeah, but that's against Gals. Yeah.
It's the same, right?
I guess, but. Yeah, but my point is more that I am confident in Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, in the coaching staff, in the players, that we can, outside of Fener and Gala away, which will be difficult under any circumstance. I'm confident that we can win every game.
It's just really difficult to prepare for a game against an opponent with a new coach because you've never been able to see that team play under this coach. So it's very difficult to prepare for it. And I know they prepare really diligently for every opponent. So I'm just very curious to see how that's going to pan out,
Yeah.
So expectations for Trabzonspor, what do you think? Are they going to rebound from their terrible start of the season?
I mean, it's probably going to be better than under Abdullah Avcı. I think
has to be.
I know he won a league title with them, but I think this is probably... I mean, at the end of the season, I looked at the form table. The last 10 games of that championship-winning season from Trabzon, they were 10th in the form table. So at the end of the season, they tried to give it to Fener, but they weren't even successful in giving it to them.
They were so far ahead, they were safe. Like, that is... Yeah. Like when it comes to crunch time, Abdullah Avcı is not very successful as a coach.
I think Şenol Güneş will have some effect on the team. I mean, we know. I mean, I think he will have some effect on them. I think they will probably play a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, they got a striker now. Like they had Draguš, but Draguš to me is not a real striker, not an out number 9. Now they have a striker. I think going into those European qualifiers without an out number 9, that is very detrimental. Like you know how I feel about Abdullah Avcı, but I think he was kind of let down by his board, honestly, by not bringing in a striker, at least for the St. Gallen games. Like, okay, you don't have him lined up for Rapid Wien yet. Okay, kind of. I don't think it's okay, but whatever. But for the St. Gallen games, they should have had a striker lined up already, and they should not have gone into those games without a proper striker. That is just scandalous.
Unforgivable.
Yeah, I think for the board, like if you look how active they've been on the transfer market, how many players they have signed early in the window, they were out of the gates running, and you don't get a proper striker. I understand you want Onuachu, but then like you're not gonna negotiate a fee from 12 million down to 5. That's not realistic. You're gonna end up at 8 or so. If you aren't able to pay that, move on to a more realistic target, which is apparently Simon Banza, which does not make sense, but whatever. We are kind of running out of time now, though, Yasin. So let's just look at
quickly at like the rest.
Yeah,
of the
just
league,
what stands out to you, other than the fact that the lower half of the table have essentially brought in like one player in between them. What stands out to you in terms of incoming and maybe in terms of outgoing? I already mentioned Tele Bashiru earlier, who went to Lazio Roma from Hatay. Is there anything that stands out to you, like incoming?
I think 2 of the 3 promoted teams in Eyüp and Göztepe have had really good summers. I think they really improved well. Eyüp's strategy has mainly been, let's get Super League experience in. Let's get Mitsio in. Let's get Turkus in. Former player of us. Kaan, yeah. Let's get a lot of players in who are decent, not great Super League players, but decent enough for what we need. And let's build a team around Super League experience. And I think that summer kind of it's going to save them. I think they're going to stay up.
Yeah, I mean they've already had good results, and they're already how many points do they have at the table right now?
8 and 4.
See, that's a fantastic start. They haven't even lost yet, so they have had a great start to the season. Gustepe, I'm not sure how many points they're on, but
6 and 4.
Yeah, see, that's have they lost? I don't think they have lost either. Like I think
they drew against Fener. They won against Bodrum now.
Oh, did they? Okay. So then they must have lost, I guess. Or did they play 4 games?
Yeah. So they lost again.
Okay. Well, I mean.
Yeah, but in Gustepe's strategy is
Gustepe drew on the first match day against Antalya 0-0. Then they drew against Fener 2-2. So they got 2 points there. So then they must have drawn one more game and won 1. That's the only way that works out. So they haven't lost either. So great starts.
And Gustepe's strategy has mainly been let's use our connections. They're owned by the same people who currently own Southampton. So they have signed a lot of players. They signed like a young Japanese midfielder who Southampton bought
Matsuki.
from the J League, and then they loaned him to Gustepe. I think they also had a really good summer.
If you remember, I think like 6 months ago, in January, I dropped a video from a player from the J League, and I said, "This is the type of player we should be signing." Yes.
And it was that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. See, so they made good business. Bodrum less so. I think Bodrum, they signed one player who has a good goal scoring record, but in like obscure leagues. I think in like Ukrainian lower leagues, and I think somewhere in Arabia they signed Talund, something like an Albanian player who has a good goal scoring record, but again in obscure leagues, and the rest of the transfers have not been very inspiring. So I think Bodrum are going to be the one promoted team to go down.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think Bodrum, Hatay, and the other 2 teams will have to wait and see. I'm not 100. I'm not super confident in Antalya. I actually tipped them as one of the relegation teams this season, but then I watched them against us. I think Samudio is, they have quality. They have some good players.
Samudio is definitely a signing. I'm impressed they did, because he has Super League experience. He had Rize. He's been decent in Mexico based on his numbers. So I think he's definitely, and he had a good start. 3 goals in 4 games.
And he was really good. Like I said, he was really good. I thought he was really good at Rize. I really think that's a good player. They have some good players for sure, but Alex de Souza is maybe a little bit of an inexperienced coach, and I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I don't see them as. I definitely don't think they'll be left column. They'll definitely be right column this season. To put it in the old teletext verbiage, but I still think they'll struggle. But definitely Bodrum and Hatay for me are probably down.
Some teams, I mean, quick word on Samsun. I think Samsun are probably the most solid team in the league. Like, they're not going to be in Europe. They're not going to be in relegation. I think they're going to be the most mid-table team in this league, which for them is perfectly fine. They've got a coach in Thomas Reis, who I'm familiar with because of his work in Germany. He's very good at, like, coaching low mid-table teams, because he has like a very aggressive man-to-man press. So I think they're going to be perfectly fine. Adana Demirspor, I'm kind of worried for them.
Oh yeah, 100%. They're going down. But about
I had them as like 12. I mean, some people had them way too high.
No.
But I thought, okay, they're gonna be mid-table, but no. After those first 4 games, they're looking disastrous.
And about Samsun, actually, that is one of the teams right now I expect will take points from Gala and Fener.
Away, yeah.
Yeah, I expect them to take points. There's a couple, like this is what we were talking about earlier. There's very few teams in the league that I think can hurt, Fener, Gala, and even us maybe. But Samsun are definitely one of them. I think when we played them, we won 2-0, but they were better than us in that game. And if they can just score a goal, and that Muandil Maji guy, he weighs on your defense. So I agree with you. They're definitely one of the more solid teams in the league. And Rizespor, I really expect they're one of the better teams as well in terms of football.
Disappointment,
but they are just so vulnerable against bigger teams because they play very open. Plus, then they have a goalkeeper who can't catch anything. So
yeah. I don't know. Rize, I think they've been a bit disappointing to me. I've expected more.
They started off really well, but then obviously they had that loss against Fener, and then this week they lost again 1-0. So, yeah, I don't know. Anything else, like in terms of incoming transfers that stands out? We don't really need to go over all these teams. We'll talk about them in the coming weeks, but...
Yeah. I think Rizespor, they signed like a young Bosnian midfielder. I watched some videos of his just because the transfer looked really interesting to me, and he looks like a really tidy midfielder, like very good ability on the ball. I think it's a very interesting transfer. I think that, and then obviously you have the Super League transfer of player who was once good at it in a top 5 league who lost a lot of value, and now, for example, Antalya, they signed. We talked about it before the broadcast. Yeah. Who was like really good at Lazio and then went to Monaco, and since then his career kind of spiraled into nothingness a bit. And now he's at Antalya on loan.
And the Bosnian kid you're talking about, Bulju Basic, he is, I believe, Čajko Rizespor's record signing for...
I mean, he cost over $1 million.
I think he's their record signing. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he was their record signing. Any other signings that really stood out to you? That because usually we've had these over the years, like where you get like Samuel Eto'o to Antalyaspor, those types of things. Like sometimes there's really flashy stuff going on, like Adana Demirspor, of course, with Balotelli. But this season, not really.
This season, outside of like the top teams, I mean, even outside of us and Fener and Gala, like even Trabzon haven't. I mean, they have now signed the player from Braga that you talked about, but he's also not a flashy name. He's just a good player.
He's just somebody that scored a lot of goals, and I mean, I don't even know if he's a good player. Yeah, could be a wooden plank for all I know. I haven't watched him play, so
Yeah, but I mean, this season has mostly been clubs not being able to sign players because the money is just not there. Yeah. I mean, Adana Demirspor probably had like the funniest thing. They loaned a player from PSG, and then they signed him on the permanent, and now he's already gone.
Eduard Michu. He was actually quite good last season, and he started off really well this season as well. A very weird situation, but I think that just again goes down to the fact that they, for 2 seasons, spent a ridiculous amount of money. They got Belhanda on like a $3.5 million deal. They got Balotelli on I don't want to know how much money. Svensson, like this is also something that irked me a lot. People were saying, "Oh, Svensson's an Anadolu player." No, Svensson is not an Anadolu player. Svensson is a really freaking good right back from the Dutch league. That was one of the best right backs in the Eredivisie for years, and he went to Adana Demirspor, who is an Anadolu team, because they were spending ridiculous money and getting players like Balotelli and getting players like Belhanda, players that an Anadolu team under normal circumstances could never sign. And Svensson is the same. That is a player that under normal circumstances would never end up at an Anadolu team. Frederick Michu, for example, I don't think he ever ends up at Pendik or now at Eyüp if he didn't go to Galatasaray first. You know what I mean? Like, I think he
might just like the city and wants to stay because he's now in Istanbul teams. Yeah. I mean, Eyüp also are like the other Demirspor now in terms of the money they spend.
They spend nowhere near the money Adana Demirspor spent though. Like they don't have 3.5-4 million contracts. Like you have to think, like just Belhanda and Balotelli alone was almost 10 million pressing on a wage bill, right? Like, can you imagine that? That's what most Anadolu teams play for their entire team, eh? That's what they paid for 2 players.
And now they pay the price for that.
Oh yeah, of course, but that was always gonna happen. Like I've seen this happen so many times already in the Turkish league, where a small team, a minnow, because with all due respect, I think Adana Demirspor have fantastic fans. They have fantastic potential as a club, but they aren't there at the moment. And they,
I mean, in my mind, they're like a lower league club because they. I mean, I know they spend a lot of time, but in recent history,
of course,
they were like a lower
they were
league
out of the
club.
Super League for like 20 years or something like that, like, or even longer, 25. I think like last season they spent in the Super League was the early 90s or something like that, or maybe the late 90s, but it was definitely since the 90s. They haven't been in the Super League in the 2000s, other than when they just came back up. They are a club like Eskişehirspor with a lot of potential, but living above their stance. You know, they were
living above their means.
Exactly, yeah, and that's happened a lot in Turkey. You know, you've had lots of clubs like that over the years that have done crazy stuff and then ended up folding. If you remember, in the 90s, Istanbulspor was getting
Sergen for ridiculous money.
I think they got. Did they get Alpay? I don't remember. I think they might have gotten Alpay. They got Aykut Kocaman, Safet Akyüz. Like, they got lots of these high-profile Turkish players for lots of money, and they were around for a while, but it didn't last. You know. Anything else, Yasin, or can we finish the episode?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right, then. Well, then, thank you very much for watching this episode of the rest of the Super League for the 2024-2025 season. Obviously, this is for the first 4 match days of the Super League. Let us know.
Plus the transfer window.
The transfer window, and a little bit of Europe. Everything true. You know, everything sparkled in a little bit. Let us know what you think about this type of content. Are you interested in this at all? Because obviously we are a Beşiktaş channel, and we are always talking about things from a Beşiktaş perspective, including this. We're not trying to be neutral. We're not trying to be, we're looking at this from our perspective. So that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think in the comments below. Give us a like, a subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And don't forget to check out our Patreon page if you want to support us by going to patreon.com/BeşiktaşPodcast. For just $1.99, you can become a VIP member, a Black Eagle VIP member, I should say, which gives you access to our VIP audio podcast and a lot of extra content on top of that as well. Thank you for watching, and see you again next time.